The dragon had been dying for 3,000 years. Not quickly, not kindly, but slowly like a star burning out in the cold emptiness of space. His name was, and once he had been a creature of impossible beauty. His scales had shone like liquid silver mixed with starlight. His wings had stretched wide enough to block out suns. His fire had burned hot enough to melt planets. Now he was nothing but pain and rust and forgotten memories. The ship that held him prisoner was called the Celestial Throne. It had been built by the elder races, beings so ancient and powerful that they had shaped entire galaxies with their thoughts. They had gone to war against each other, as powerful beings often do, and had been caught in the middle. They had captured him, chained him, forced him to power their great warship with his life force. Then they had all died, every single one of them. Their empire crumbled, their worlds turned to dust, and everyone forgot about the dragon trapped in the heart of a broken ship, drifting through the endless dark. The quantum chains that held were designed to be unbreakable. They dug into his flesh, wrapped around his wings, coiled through his very soul. They had weakened over the centuries, damaged by time and neglect, but they still held. They always held. Every 100 years, gathered what little strength remained in his ancient body and sent out a call. It was not a radio signal or a message that could be picked up by machines. It was something deeper, a psychic scream that echoed across dimensions, reaching out to any mind that might hear it. Help me, please, someone, anyone. For 3,000 years, no one answered. The other ancient beings who might have heard him were dead or gone. The younger races that had risen in the empty spaces left behind by the elder races were too primitive, too deaf to the frequencies of thought. Calls went out into the universe and vanished like stones dropped into an infinite ocean. He had stopped hopping long ago. Now he called out simply because it was the only thing he could still do, the only proof that he was still alive. But on this night, something different happened. Someone heard him. Was 28 years old, and she had been a salvage captain for exactly 6 years. Her ship was called the Wandering Star, and it was held together by welded patches, desperate prayers, and her younger brother's engineering miracles. She made her living by finding old wrecks in space, taking them apart and selling the pieces. It was not a glamorous job. It was not even a particularly safe job, but it was honest work and it kept her small crew fed. That crew consisted of exactly 2 other people. Her brother was 24, skinny, always covered in engine grease, and possibly the best mechanic in this sector of space. He could fix anything. He had once rebuilt their ship's main engine using parts from a broken coffee machine and what he described as creative optimism. The other crew member was Myra, their pilot. She was 32, had spent 8 years in the military before deciding she hated taking orders, and could fly their ship through an asteroid field while half asleep. She was practical, cautious, and absolutely convinced that was going to get them all killed someday. Tonight might be that someday. Sat alone in the cockpit, staring at a signal on her screen that should not exist. It was not a radio wave. It was not any kind of transmission she recognized. But somehow her equipment had picked it up, and somehow she could feel it. Not hear it, feel it. It was like a voice whispering directly into her brain. A voice filled with so much pain and loneliness that it made her chest hurt. Help me, please. What the hell is that? She whispered to herself. She ran the signal through every analysis program she had. Nothing made sense. The signal was coming from deep space, from a region so far from any known civilization that it might as well be the edge of the universe. No one went out there. There was nothing out there. Except something was calling to her. Did not tell her crew about the signal for 3 days. She spent those days listening to it, analyzing it, trying to convince herself that she was imagining things. She was not a psychic. She had no special abilities. She was just a salvage captain with a beat-up ship and too many debts. But the voice would not leave her alone. Finally, she called and Myra to the cockpit and told them everything. She showed them the signal. She explained what she felt when she listened to it. They both looked at her like she had lost her mind. "You want us to fly into uncharted space," Myra said slowly, "because you're hearing voices." "It's not voices," said, "it's one voice, and it's in pain. That makes it so much better." Was studying the signal data on his tablet. His brow was furrowed, his fingers tapping against the screen. "The signal is real," he said. "I mean, I can see it on the instruments. I can't explain what it is, but it exists." "Great," Myra said. "So something exists. That doesn't mean we should go looking for it. Do you know how many salvage crews have disappeared chasing mystery signals? I'll give you a hint. It's a lot." Understood Myra's fear. She even agreed with it on some level. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of decision that got people killed. But she could not stop hearing that voice. "Help me, please. I have been alone for so long." "Someone is out there," she said quietly. "Someone is hurting, and they're calling for help." "Someone or something," Myra corrected. "Does it matter?" Myra opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She stared at for a long moment. They had known each other for 4 years. They had been through bad situations together. Myra knew that look on his face. "You're going whether we come with you or not," Myra said. "Yes. And if it's a trap, if it's some kind of predator luring ships to their death." Smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then I guess you'll have to save me." Myra cursed under her breath, was already pulling up navigation charts, calculating the fuel they would need. He had not even argued. He never did when made up her mind about something. "This is a terrible idea," Myra said. "Probably," agreed. "We're probably going to die." "Maybe." Myra threw her hands up. "Fine, fine. But when we get eaten by some ancient space monster, I'm going to be very annoying about it in the afterlife." The wandering star changed course that night. It turned away from the safe trade routes, away from the salvage yards and space stations and everything familiar. It pointed its nose toward the empty dark and began to fly. The journey took 11 days. During those 11 days, the signal grew stronger. Could feel it now even when she was not at her instruments. It was like a song stuck in her head, except the song was made of pure loneliness and centuries of forgotten pain. She did not sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw something. A glimpse of silver scales, a flash of golden eyes, wings stretching across the stars. Something was waiting for her in the dark. On the 12th day, they found it. The ship was enormous. It was ancient beyond anything had ever seen, built in a style that matched no known civilization. Its hull was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when she looked at them directly. Parts of it were broken, torn open by weapons that must have been devastating. Other parts still glowed with a faint, sickly light. It was a graveyard, a tomb, a prison. And something inside it was still alive. Stood at the cockpit window staring at the ancient ship. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Behind her and Myra were completely silent. The voice in her head spoke again, stronger now, closer. "You came after all this time. You actually came." "Yes," whispered, "I'm here." Told her crew to stay on the ship. Myra argued. She argued loudly and with many creative insults. She called stupid, reckless, suicidal, and several other words that had never heard before. But in the end, won. She always did. "If something happens to me," said as she put on her space suit, "take the ship and go. Don't come after me. Don't try to be heroes, just go." "I hate you," Myra said. "I know." Handed her a small device. "Emergency beacon," he explained. "If you get in trouble, press this button. We'll come get you." "I told you not to." "I know what you told us." His young face was serious. "I'm ignoring it." Wanted to argue, but she did not have time. The voice in her head was pulling at her, drawing her toward the ancient ship like a magnet pulling at iron. She needed to go. She needed to find whatever was calling her. She needed to understand. The airlock opened and stepped out into the void. Her suit's small thrusters pushed her toward the massive wreck. Up close, it was even more impressive and terrifying than it had looked from a distance. The ship was at least 10 kilometers long, covered in towers and domes and structures that made no sense. It had been beautiful once. Now it was just sad. She found a hole in the hull and went inside. The interior of the ship was dark. Her helmet lights cut through the blackness, revealing corridors that stretched in impossible directions. The walls were covered in more of those strange shifting symbols. The air inside was stale but breathable. She turned off her helmet and took a careful breath. It smelled old and tired and forgotten. The voice guided her deeper into the ship. Turn left here, go down these stairs, through this door. It was not controlling her. It was simply showing her the way like a friend giving directions. She followed without question. She walked for almost an hour. The ship was enormous, a maze of corridors and chambers that seemed to go on forever. She passed rooms filled with machines she could not understand. She passed windows that looked out into spaces that could not exist. She passed skeletons of creatures that had died so long ago they had turned to dust. Finally, she reached the center of the ship. The chamber was vast. It took up the entire core of the vessel, a hollow space that must have been a kilometer across. And in the center of that space, wrapped in chains of glowing light, was a dragon. Stopped, she could not move, she could not breathe. She had expected something, a creature maybe, an alien being of some kind, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The dragon was enormous, easily the length of a football field, maybe more. Its body was long and serpentine, covered in scales that must have once been beautiful but were now cracked and dull. Its wings, folded tight against its sides, were torn and thin. Its claws were chipped. Its eyes were closed. The chains that held it were made of light. They dug into the dragon's flesh, wrapped around its limbs, coiled through its wings. They pulsed with a sickly golden glow, and where they touched the dragon's body, they left wounds that never healed. Felt sick. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no." The dragon's eyes opened. They were gold, deep, ancient gold, like coins that had been buried for 1,000 years. They held pain and exhaustion and something that might have been hope. The voice spoke again, but now it came from the dragon itself. "You are not of the elder races." The words formed directly in its mind. They did not sound like words exactly. They were more like feelings, concepts, ideas that her brain translated into language. "No," she said aloud, her voice echoed in the vast chamber. "I'm human." "Human?" The dragon seemed to consider this. "I do not know this word. I cannot feel your history. Your species is young. About 200,000 years old, give or take." The dragon made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a cry. "A baby, an infant species. I have slept for longer than your entire existence." Did not know what to say. She just stood there staring at this ancient creature, this being from an age she could not comprehend. He was so old, so tired, so hurt. "What happened to you?" she asked. The dragon was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his mental voice was heavy with old grief. "My name is, I was born when the universe was still young. I watched galaxies form and die. I flew between stars before your sun existed. I was free once, free and powerful and alive. Then came the elder races, beings who thought they owned everything. They built empires that stretched across the cosmos. They made war on each other with weapons that could destroy entire star systems. And they needed power, so much power. They found me, captured me, chained me here in the heart of their greatest warship. They used my life force to fuel their weapons, their shields, their engines. I burned for them. I suffered for them. I screamed, and they did not care. Then their war ended, not because anyone won, because everyone lost. Their empires crumbled. Their worlds died. They were all gone, every last one of them, and I was left here, forgotten, abandoned, left to rust inside this broken ship. Felt tears on her face. She had not noticed she was crying. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been here?" 3,000 years, give or take. 3,000 years. Could not imagine it. 3,000 years of pain, of loneliness, of calling out for help and never receiving an answer. 3,000 years of slowly dying in the dark. "You sent out calls," she said. "I heard you. I have called 30 times. Every century I gather my strength and I reach out. I beg for someone, anyone to come, but no one ever answered. The elder races are dead. The younger species cannot hear me. My calls go out into the void and disappear. Until you." The dragon's golden eyes fixed on her face. "You heard me, little human. Why, how? You are so young, so small, so limited. How could you possibly hear what entire civilizations could not?" Shook her head. "I don't know, I don't understand it either. I just felt you, your pain, your loneliness. I couldn't ignore it." Was quiet again. His massive chest rose and fell slowly. The chains pulsed with their sickly light. "You came," he said finally. "You heard my call and you came. Not because you wanted something from me. Not because you hoped to gain power or wealth or knowledge. You came because I was in pain." "Yes. Why?" The question hung in the air. Thought about it. She thought about her life, her crew, her tiny ship held together by hope and hard work. She thought about all the times she had made stupid decisions, taken foolish risks, done things that made no sense. "Because someone needed help," she said, "and I could try to give it. That's enough reason for me." The dragon stared at her. His ancient eyes, which had seen the birth and death of stars, which had watched civilizations rise and fall, now looked at this small human woman with something like wonder. "You are a strange creature, little human." "Yeah," agreed. "I get that a lot." She stepped closer to the chains. They hummed with energy, with power that she could feel even from a distance. They were beyond anything she understood, beyond anything humanity had ever created. But as she looked at them, as she studied the way they connected to the ship systems, something sparked in her mind. An idea. A crazy, stupid, impossible idea. "These chains," she said, "they're connected to the ship, they draw power from it. Yes, when the ship was whole they were unbreakable, but the ship is dying. The chains are weaker now, still too strong for me to break, but weaker. What if we could overload them, feed them too much power?" His eyes widened slightly. "That would require control of the ship's systems, knowledge of their technology. It would be incredibly dangerous." "I have an engineer who can fix anything," said, "and a pilot who's already planning to haunt me in the afterlife. We've done dangerous before." She looked up at the dragon's massive face. "I can't promise anything, but I can try. Will you let me try?" For a long moment said nothing. The chains pulsed. The ancient ship groaned around them. 3,000 years of despair pressed down on the dragon's soul. Then slowly, he lowered his great head until his golden eye was level with his face. "Try, little human, please try." Nodded, she raised her hand and pressed it against his snout. His scales were cold and rough, but somewhere beneath them she could feel a faint warmth, a spark of life that refused to die. "Hold on," she whispered. "We're going to get you out of here." She turned and began walking back toward her ship. Behind her, for the first time in 3,000 years, the dragon allowed himself to hope. When returned to the wandering star and told her crew what she had found, the argument lasted for 2 hours. Myra paced back and forth across the small common room, her hands waving in the air. Her voice got louder with every sentence. She called crazy at least 15 times. She described in detail all the ways this could go wrong. She pointed out that they were salvage operators, not rescue heroes, and certainly not dragon freers. "A dragon," she kept saying. "A dragon. You found an actual dragon chained up in an ancient alien ship, and your first thought was, let me help him. Not, let me run away very fast. Not, this seems like a bad idea. He's been trapped for 3,000 years, said. He's dying. Lots of things are dying. The universe is full of dying things. That doesn't mean we have to save all of them. Had been quiet during the argument. He sat at the common room table, his tablet in front of him, scrolling through the data had collected during her exploration of the ancient ship. His face was thoughtful, focused. He was not listening to the argument. He was already working on the problem. I think I can do it, he said. Both women stopped and looked at him. What? Myra asked. The chains. They're connected to the ship's power systems. If I can understand how those systems work, I can overload them. Force too much energy through the chains. They'll break. Myra stared at him. You're serious. The technology is old, really old. But technology is still technology. It follows rules. It has patterns. I just need to figure out the patterns. And if you're wrong, if something goes bad. Looked up from his tablet. His young face was calm, almost peaceful. Then we die, I guess, but we were always going to die someday. At least this way it means something. Myra made a strangled sound of frustration. She turned too, her eyes pleading. Talk sense into him, talk sense into both of you. This is not our problem. We don't owe that creature anything. We can just leave, fly away, pretend we never found this place. Was quiet for a moment. She thought about his golden eyes, filled with so much pain and weariness. She thought about his voice in her head, that ancient voice that had called out for help 30 times and been ignored every single time. Other beings heard his call, she said slowly. I can feel it. Over the centuries, others heard him. They just didn't come. They calculated the risks and decided it wasn't worth it. They heard someone begging for help and they chose to do nothing. Because they were smart, Myra said. Because they didn't care. The elder races, the ancient civilizations, all those powerful beings who could have saved him. They had the technology. They had the ability. But they looked at a creature in pain and decided he wasn't their problem. Stood up. She was not a tall woman, but in that moment, she seemed bigger than she was. I don't want to be like them, she said. I don't want to live in a universe where we just ignore suffering because helping is hard. That dragon has been alone for 3,000 years. He's been in pain every single day. And the only reason he's still alive is because some tiny part of him kept hoping that someone somewhere would finally answer his call. She looked at Myra directly. We answered, we're here. How can we just leave? Myra held her gaze for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes and let out a long, heavy breath. I really hate you sometimes, she said. I know. This is the thing we've ever done. Probably. If we survive, you're buying drinks for the rest of my life. Smiled deal. They moved the wandering star closer to the ancient ship and docked at one of the damaged sections. Over the next 3 weeks, they practically lived inside the celestial throne. Spent every waking hour studying the ship systems, learning its language, understanding its patterns. Help where she could, carrying equipment, running tests, keeping everyone fed. Myra piloted their small shuttle between the two ships, moving supplies and complaining constantly. And through it all talked too. She visited him every day. She sat in that vast chamber, surrounded by ancient technology and forgotten history, and she talked to a dragon. She told him about humanity, about their short history and their long journey to the stars. She told him about Earth, about oceans and mountains and cities. She told him about her own life, about losing her parents young, about raising, about becoming a salvage captain, because it was the only way she knew how to survive. In return, told her stories that made her head spin. He spoke of the beginning of the universe, of the first stars being born in the endless dark. He spoke of civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun even existed. He spoke of the elder races, beings of such power that they could reshape reality with their thoughts, and of how that power had ultimately destroyed them. "Your species is strange," he told her one day. "You are so young, so small, so fragile, and yet you are here." "We're stubborn," said. "It's kind of our main feature." More than stubborn. The elder races studied the universe for billions of years. They calculated every possibility, predicted every outcome. When they heard my calls, they analyzed the situation and decided the risks outweighed the benefits. They made the logical choice. And we made the illogical choice. Yes, you heard someone suffering and you came to help, even though it made no sense, even though it could kill you, even though you had nothing to gain. His great head turned to look at her, his golden eyes thoughtful. "I have lived for 50,000 years. I have met countless species. None of them would have done what you are doing, not for a stranger, not for an alien creature they could not understand. What makes humans so different?" Thought about the question. She thought about humanity's history, about all the terrible things they had done to each other and all the wonderful things they had done as well. She thought about her parents, who had died trying to save passengers on a failing ship. She thought about who stayed up every night working on impossible problems. She thought about Myra, who complained constantly but was always there when it mattered. "I don't know if we're different," she finally said. "Maybe we're just too young to know better. Maybe we haven't learned yet that helping is supposed to be calculated. We just feel things and we act on those feelings." "That is chaos." "Yeah, it is." Made that sound again, the one that might be a laugh or might be a cry. "Your species is chaos given form. You do not solve problems. You simply refuse to acknowledge them until they give up." Grinned. "Is that a compliment?" "I have not decided yet." On the 18th day, figured out the ship's main systems. On the 20th day, he managed to create a connection between the wandering star's computers and the celestial throne's ancient technology. On the 21st day, he discovered how the quantum chains worked. "They're designed to be unbreakable," he explained to and Myra, his words tumbling out fast in his excitement. "They adapt to any force applied to them. If you try to pull them apart, they become stronger. If you try to cut them, they heal. If you try to burn them, they absorb the energy." "So how do we break them?" asked. "We don't, we make them break themselves." Pulled up a diagram on his tablet. "The chains draw power from the ship to maintain themselves, but the ship's power core is damaged. It's unstable. If we can create a feedback loop, force too much power through the chains all at once, they'll overload and shatter." Myra frowned. "And what happens to us when ancient alien technology overloads?" Hesitated. "It depends on how much energy is released. Best case, just the chains break. Worst case, we all die horribly. I prefer to think of it as rapid, unplanned disassembly." "That's the same thing. But it sounds better." Looked at her brother, at her pilot, at these two people who had followed her into the dark because she asked them to. They were terrified. She could see it in their eyes, but they were still here. "Can we do this?" she asked. Nodded. "I think so. The ship systems are damaged but functional. If I can control the power flow, if everything goes exactly right." "And if it doesn't?" Her brother met her eyes. "Then we die trying to save a dragon. There are worse ways to go." Took a deep breath. She thought about his ancient eyes and his ancient pain. She thought about all the beings who had heard his call and done nothing. "Start preparing," she said. "We're breaking those chains." The day came faster than any of them expected. Had done everything he could. He had mapped the ship's power systems, created the feedback loop program, and run every simulation he could think of. The numbers looked good. The theory was solid, but theory and reality were different things, and they all knew it. On the morning of the 23rd day, went to see one last time before the attempt. The dragon was waiting for her. His massive body lay curled in the center of the chamber, wrapped in those glowing chains that had held him for 3,000 years. His golden eyes watched her approach with something like affection. "Little human," he said, "you have come." "We're ready," said. "My brother is starting the process in 1 hour." Was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, and his mental voice was heavy with concern. "I must tell you something. I should have told you before, but I was selfish. I wanted to believe this would work." "What is it?" "There is a chance this will fail. Not just fail, but destroy everything. The energy contained in these chains, in this ship, it is beyond anything your species has ever encountered. If something goes wrong, the release could be catastrophic." "I know," explained the risks. "No, you do not understand." The dragon's great head rose, his eyes meeting hers. "I am old, little human. I have lived long enough. If your plan fails and I die, that is acceptable. But you and your crew, you have your whole lives ahead of you. You should not risk them for me." Walked closer until she was standing right in front of his massive face. She reached out and placed her hand on his snout, feeling the rough texture of his ancient scales. "You've been alone for 3,000 years, she said quietly. "You've called for help 30 times and no one came. You've spent in pain, in darkness, in hopelessness. And now you're telling me to leave, to save myself. I am telling you that you have a choice. You always have a choice." "Yeah, I do," smiled. "And I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing to try, because that's what humans do. We don't leave people behind, not when they're hurting, not when they need us." Stared at her. His golden eyes, which had seen the birth and death of stars, now glistened with something that might have been tears. "You are remarkable creatures," he said. "So young, so foolish, so incredibly brave." "We try." She stepped back and looked at him one more time. This ancient being, this creature from the dawn of time, who had suffered so much and still held on to hope. "I'll see you on the other side," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her ship. The control room on the wandering star was cramped, and Myra squeezed in together, surrounded by screens and readouts and blinking lights. Through the viewport, they could see the ancient hull of the celestial throne stretching out into the darkness. His fingers moved across his controls, making final adjustments. His face was pale but focused. He had not slept in 2 days, and it showed in the dark circles under his eyes. "Everything is ready," he said. "I've established control of the ship's main power systems. The feedback loop is programmed. All I have to do is activate it." "How long will it take?" asked. "Once I start the process, about 4 minutes. The power will build gradually, then surge through the chains. If everything works, they'll overload and break. If not—" He did not finish the sentence. Myra was already at the pilot's seat, her hands on the controls. "I've got the engines hot. If we need to run, I can get us out of here in 30 seconds. "We're not running," said. "I know, but I like having the option." They looked at each other. 3 people who had started as strangers and become family. 3 people who were about to risk everything for a creature they had known for less than a month. "Any last words?" Myra asked. Shrugged. "If this works, I'm sleeping for a week. And if it doesn't, then I won't need to sleep at all." Despite everything, laughed. It was a small sound, but it helped. It reminded her why she loved these 2 people, why she would follow them anywhere and knew they would do the same for her. "Start the process," she said. Took a deep breath. Then he pressed the activation button. For a moment, nothing happened. The screens showed data flowing, power levels rising, systems activating. But there was no visible change, no dramatic display. Then the celestial throne began to glow. It started slowly, a faint light appearing along the ancient ship's hull. The light grew brighter, spreading through the ship like blood through veins. The symbols on the walls began to pulse. The entire vessel seemed to wake up from its long sleep. "Power levels rising," reported, his voice tight. 20%, 30, 40. Inside the ship, they could see flashes of light through the viewports. The chain room, where waited, was lighting up like a star. 60%, 70%. The chains are resisting, they're trying to adapt. Can they? Asked. Maybe the system is fighting back. It doesn't want to let go. Warning alarms began to sound. The wandering star shuddered as waves of energy rippled out from the ancient ship. Myra's hands tightened on the controls, keeping them steady. 80%, 85%, we're in the danger zone now. The celestial throne was blazing with light. The symbols on its hull were spinning, changing, screaming in some ancient language. The chains around were glowing so bright that could see them even from here, burning lines of power cutting through the ship's heart. 90%, the chains are cracking, they're starting to break. A massive pulse of energy shot out from the ancient ship. The wandering star rocked violently. Screens flickered. Lights went out and came back on. 95%, almost there, almost. The feedback loop failed. Screens went red. Alarms screamed. The power levels began dropping rapidly, the chains healing, adapting, overcoming the assault. No, shouted. No, 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 the system is compensating, it's redirecting the power. What do we do? Demanded. I don't know, the loop is collapsing, we're losing it. Myra's voice cut through the chaos. We need to leave. Now, the energy buildup is unstable, if it releases while we're this close. Wait, said. His eyes were fixed on his screen, his fingers flying across the controls. Wait, I have an idea. What idea? The system is redirecting the power to save itself. But what if we don't let it? What if we force all the power through a single point? How? By using our ship's reactor as a trigger. We connect our power to theirs, create a spike they can't adapt to. Myra went pale. That could destroy our reactor. It could destroy our entire ship. Probably, agreed. Looked at her brother. He was scared. She could see it in his eyes, but he was also determined, ready to do whatever it took. Do it, she said. Nodded, his fingers moved. Connecting now, power transfer in 3, 2, 1. The universe went white. Inside the chamber of chains, felt it. The surge of power, the impossible spike of energy that no ancient system could have predicted. It came from outside, from that tiny human ship, from those impossible creatures who refused to give up. The chains screamed. For 3,000 years they had held. Through wars and centuries and endless darkness, they had never failed. But now, faced with something they could not understand, something that should not exist, they could not adapt fast enough. They shattered. The explosion of light and energy tore through the celestial throne. Ancient walls crumbled. Systems that had survived finally died. The great ship began to break apart, unable to contain the forces that had been unleashed. Rose. For the first time in 3,000 years he was free. His muscles screamed in pain. His wings could barely move. His fire was just a spark, but he was free. He felt the tiny human ship, damaged and spinning, thrown by the blast. He felt the 3 lives inside it, fragile and terrified but still alive. Without thinking, he moved. His massive body, weakened by centuries of captivity, pushed through the dying ship and out into space. He wrapped himself around the wandering star, coiling his long form around its hull like a dragon protecting an egg. The celestial throne exploded behind them. The blast wave hits back like a hammer. He felt scales crack. He felt old wounds reopen. He felt pain beyond anything he had experienced in 3,000 years. But the human ship was safe. He held them as the fire washed over him. He held them as the ancient ship that had been his prison finally died. He held them until the light faded and the darkness returned. Then slowly, he let out a breath he had been holding for 30 centuries. Free, he thought, I am finally free. And he had 3 tiny humans to thank for it. They drifted in the darkness for 3 days. The wandering star was damaged but not destroyed. Its desperate move had burned out their main reactor, but the backup systems kept them alive. Life support worked. The lights worked. They had air and water and food. They just could not move. Not that moving was necessary, had them. The dragon was curled around their ship like a mother cat curled around her kittens. His massive body wrapped around the hull, his wings spread wide to shield them from debris and radiation. He was wounded. Burns covered his scales. Old scars had reopened, but he was alive and he was protecting them. Spent most of those 3 days sitting by the viewport watching the dragon. His golden eyes were closed, his breathing slow and steady. He was healing, she knew. Dragons were tough. They could survive almost anything, given enough time. On the second day, his voice touched her mind. "You are awake, little human." "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Too much thinking." "What are you thinking about?" Smiled. "A lot of things. Whether we'll be able to fix the ship, whether anyone will ever believe us when we tell them what happened, whether I made the right choice." "Do you doubt it?" She was quiet for a moment. Through the viewport, she could see the dragon's eye opening, that ancient golden eye looking at her with something like affection. "No," she said finally, "I don't doubt it, I'd do it again. Even though it almost killed you. Especially because of that. The things worth doing are usually the hardest." Made that sound again, the one she had come to recognize as dragon laughter. "You are strange creatures, you humans. I have lived for 50,000 years. I have met species that built empires across galaxies, that could bend reality with their thoughts, that achieved immortality. And none of them would have done what you did. Why not? Because they were wise. They understood that helping a stranger, risking everything for someone they did not know, made no logical sense. They calculated the costs and benefits and made the rational choice. And we didn't. No, you heard someone suffering and you came. No calculation, no logic, just compassion." Leaned her head against the cold viewport glass. Outside, the stars were beautiful. So many of them, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. "Maybe that's our strength," she said. "We're too young to know better, too stubborn to give up, too emotional to make the smart choice." The elder races called themselves the architects of eternity, said. They shaped the universe itself. They created wonders that would take your species millions of years to understand. And in the end, not one of them answered my call. His great head moved, turning so he could see her more clearly. "You have been among the stars for 400 years. Your technology is primitive. You are short. You are children playing in a universe built by giants. And yet you came." Felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them away. "Someone had to," she said. "No, no one had to. That is the point. No one had to help me. No one was obligated. No one would have blamed you for walking away. But you didn't. You chose to help. You chose to risk everything for a creature you had never met. That is not weakness, little human. That is strength. A different kind of strength than the elder races ever understood." On the third day, finally got the backup reactor working at full capacity. It was not enough to power the main engines, but it was enough to send a distress signal. Help would come. Eventually. Myra spent most of those 3 days complaining. She complained about the food. She complained about the cramped quarters. She complained about being wrapped in dragon coils. But every now and then, caught her looking out the viewport and there was something soft in her eyes. Something like wonder. "I can't believe we actually did it," Myra said on the third night as they all sat together in the common room. "We freed a dragon, an actual dragon, from an ancient alien prison ship." "When you say it like that, it sounds crazy," said. "It is crazy. This whole thing is crazy. We're crazy." "Probably," agreed. Myra shook her head. "What happens now? We can't just keep a dragon. Where's he going to live? What's he going to eat? Does he need to eat? I don't even know how dragons work." His voice touched all 3 of their minds at once. "Do not worry, little pilot. I will not be a burden to you." Myra jumped. Can you hear everything we say? When you are this close, yes, your thoughts are very loud. Great, no privacy. That's fine, that's totally fine. The dragon's mental voice was warm with amusement. I will heal. It will take time, but I will recover my strength. And then, I do not know, I have been a prisoner for so long, I have forgotten what it means to be free. You could stay with us, said, for a while at least, until you figure out what you want to do. Your ship is very small. We could get a bigger one, eventually. Silence, then softly. You would want me to stay. Of course, we didn't save you just to abandon you. Another silence. Could feel something through their strange mental connection, emotions too big for words, gratitude and wonder and a painful, fragile hope. I would like that, said finally. I would like that very much. On the 5th day, help arrived. A patrol ship from the nearest station, responding to their distress signal. The crew of that ship nearly fainted when they saw the dragon wrapped around the tiny salvage vessel. Word spread quickly after that. An ancient dragon, freed by humans. A prison ship from the elder races, destroyed. 3 ordinary people who had done something extraordinary. The story traveled through human space like wildfire, growing bigger with each telling. But that was not the most important thing that happened. The most important thing happened in the quiet spaces between stars, in the forgotten corners of the galaxy where other beings had been abandoned. Other creatures left to rot in broken ships, other prisoners of long-dead empires, other voices calling out into the void. They heard about the dragon. They heard about the humans who answered his call. And for the first time in centuries, eons, they began to hope. Maybe it was time to send out a call. Maybe this time someone would answer. On a space station at the edge of human territory, stood on an observation deck and watched the stars. Beside her, floated in the void, his massive body curled comfortably in the zero gravity. He was healing. His scales were starting to shine again. His fire was returning. What are you thinking about? She asked. The future, he said. For 3,000 years I thought only about the past, about what I had lost, about what had been done to me. But now, he turned his great head to look at her. Now I think about what might come, what we might do together, what you strange, brave, impossible humans might become. Smiled, and what do you think we'll become? I think the galaxy is about to change. I think the old order built by beings who calculated and measured and made the safe choices is ending, and something new is beginning. Something driven by compassion instead of logic, by hope instead of fear. He moved closer, his golden eye meeting hers. I think you humans are going to be very important, little one. Not because you are powerful, not because you are wise, but because you care. Because you answer calls that no one else will answer. Because you refuse to leave anyone behind. Reached out and placed her hand on his snout, just as she had done in that ancient prison ship so many days ago. We try, she said. I know. His voice was warm, full of an affection that had grown over the weeks they had spent together. And that is why I will stay. That is why I will help you. Because you showed me that the universe can still surprise even an ancient dragon. You showed me that hope is not foolish, that compassion is not weakness, that sometimes the youngest and smallest and most fragile creatures are the bravest of all. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between stars, another voice was calling. Another forgotten being, another abandoned prisoner, another creature in pain. And somewhere, a human ship was changing course to answer. Because that was what humans did. They showed up. Even when it was stupid, especially when it was stupid. And the galaxy would never be the same.